Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I have another fabulous guest with me today. I have Elisabeth Dana. Dana's her other name, Elisabeth Dana, who is a somatic coach and therapist. And we're going to be talking about a very popular topic that people don't want to talk about, but need to hear about, which is painful sex. Painful sex, why it happens, what to do about it, what's going on, help you understand. And even if you don't have painful sex on the regular, but you've had it even once or twice, I think this is going to be a great conversation to dive in and hear to help you understand more about your body. So welcome.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Elizabeth. Yeah, it's
Thank
great
you
to
so
have
much
you
for
here.
having me.
You're
Mm,
very welcome. Please tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, who you serve.
yeah, I'm based in the Netherlands, so a little far away from you, but I work with clients face to face in my practice, as well as with people online. And I really dedicate my work to the very powerful intersection of sexuality, trauma healing, chronic stress, and pelvic care. So those topics are so deeply intertwined, and that means that I work a lot with various pelvic complaints and different types of trauma in my practice with both men and women.
Yes, because as much as we're probably mostly going to talk about women from our own personal experiences today, men also have very tight pelvic floors and issues with
Absolutely.
their
They have
pelvic
pelvic
bowl.
floors in the first place. They often
Yeah,
don't know. They're like,
yeah.
pelvic floors, isn't that a female thing? No, men have them too. But yeah, the majority of people that actively seek help with that tend to be women more than men. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine just on its own dynamic of men not reaching out for help either. There's a little dynamic in
Yes.
there. But let's
Yes.
start with you a little bit. Like, what led you to this? What led you down this path? What is your story?
Mm, yeah. Wow. It's a very long story, but I'll try to keep
Go
it a
for
little
it.
concise. So for me, I've been in my own life on a journey towards embodiment for approximately 25 years now. So I come from a background with a lot of trauma, both in my own family setting as well as intergenerational. And that means that being embodied wasn't really a natural thing for all of us in our family. And
Hmm.
through some of the hardships that we endured, actually, I tried so many different disciplines for my own personal development. And it wasn't really until I discovered body oriented therapies and body oriented modalities that I was like, oh, oh, so this is what it is all about.
Hmm.
And through that journey, I learned more and more about, yeah, like I was saying, this powerful intersection, which also in my own life showed up so vividly and makes so much sense to my clients at the same time. So my journey around becoming embodied and working through somatic experiencing and other somatic modalities as well as really working on my own sexuality. I tended to have relationships where, very classically, the first 6 to 8 to 9, 10 months, it would be absolutely fabulous, purely hormonal phase with amazing sex. And then after a while, things would just dwindle and really go down the drain. Um, and I really learned that through the embodiment journey that I've gone through and really embracing pleasure, not only did that help to really regulate my nervous system, but also really to improve my own sex life in very dramatic ways. And that journey is, I don't know, when I look back to it now, I tend to smile from ear to ear because it's been very painful, arduous journey, but also just so joyful. And having ended up where I am right now, it's just so beautiful to share with other people, both men and women that are struggling with anything on that intersection, how to create steps that make you feel more empowered so that you can really learn to live in your own body from a place of power and a place of pleasure. And yeah, that's really what drives me personally and professionally.
I love this. And for people who are listening, let's break down being embodied, what that means. They're like, okay, what is being
Mm,
embodied? If this is new to them, they might be like, huh?
yeah. So for me, being embodied is feeling that you are present in your own flesh. not necessarily all the time, but the majority of the time and the majority of your body. So it means that there aren't really many blind spots in your body anymore. Many times, due to the way that our cultures are at the moment, we're basically walking heads.
Yep.
So rather than really feeling any connection to our body at all, we live from this place only. And these people, when I would ask them, for example, can you feel your feet? Can you feel your feet on the floor? They'd be like, oh, hang on a second. Do I even have feet? Yes, you actually do. But it
Yeah.
means really coming home to your body. And if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, without sounding too woo woo, it is really incarnating. So, really coming home in your flesh and feeling that
Mhm.
you are a human with a body that can experience life at its fullest.
Yeah, all the emotions, all of the bits of pleasure or pain or every single piece in between. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I would reiterate there, like, yeah, it's that presence, it's being present, it's being able to feel your seat in the chair, your feet on the ground, able to tap in to pleasure on all pieces of
Mm,
your body. Um, Being able to trust your body, being able to find safety and truth within your own body, especially pelvic
yeah.
bowl for female identifying humans, where is our intuitive power center of wisdom and getting
Mm,
answers from your body, not so much from your head of, is this a good decision for me? Is this not? Do I do this or do I do
exactly.
this? And
Yeah.
trusting that what we call gut feeling, which I believe that is very accurate for men, gut, but for women, it's more
Mm.
it's okay, lower gut, if we're gonna call it that, pelvic bowl, which is
Yeah.
really womb, ovary, pussy space.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. I love how you point that out. The importance of really trusting the signals from your body and understanding how your body can actually be such a beautiful anchor point and compass for how you design and lead your life.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to kind of give my examples for what it was like before I was embodied, there was so much. Oh my gosh, I could list so much. But yes, came
Mhm.
from a ton of trauma as well in childhood. And some people might not see it as big, huge trauma, but there is, trauma there layered on. Layered, 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 and how it showed up for me in even my 20s and 30s body-wise, and especially because 'cause we're gonna go into pelvic floor talk, it showed up in a very tight, contracted pelvic floor, which had
Mm.
problems with, first delivery and second, to be honest. First, so tight of a pelvic floor that, my oldest flipped upside down in utero at 36 weeks pregnant.
Mm.
It's really not supposed to happen then, but it was
Mhm.
so tight that he flipped. Second delivery, um, later on was such a tight pelvic floor that when he came through, he actually tore up above, like above cervix, like really high up in
Mm.
vaginal canal because everything was again so contracted and so tight. So there's two ways
Yeah.
of literally how my trauma. I could go into nursing as well. Every time I nursed each of my 3 babies, I had issues with my left breast, and I kept getting mastitis, and I kept
Wow.
having problems just nursing on the left side, and it's actually the side that I was sexually assaulted on when I was 14, right?
Mm.
So literally body
Yeah.
was talking the whole time. Lower
Yeah.
back pain, a lot of lower back pain, a lot of hormonal issues because of unaddressed, unhealed, unintegrated trauma. And
Mm.
it makes a really big difference. It doesn't matter where your trauma is coming from specifically, but our body holds it, right? We hold it in our
Yeah.
more sexual areas, which would be our pussy, pelvic bowl, pelvic floor, up to breast, throat, all of these areas we contract and we hold. And
Yeah.
so many people are holding and when you're holding that tight, I'm gripping my fist for those who are listening. When you're holding that tight, because you can't trust, you can't surrender, you can't find safety in your own body. It really does show up in there's 3 or 4 examples, but there's so many different ways that it shows up sexually, especially pelvic floor.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the key points that you're already sharing here, how important the state of your nervous system is in terms of relaxation for the pelvic floor. And I think
Mhm.
it's also beautiful what you said. It's not just like gigantic events and occurrences. that currently people often associate with trauma. It's also chronic stress. And I find it important to reiterate that if stress in your life, for whatever reason, if it's work, if it's private, if it's finance, if it's relationship wise, all these types of things that can cause stress during much longer periods of time, they will accumulate in your system and ultimately bring the same symptoms as single, very horrible traumatic events might.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to realize that, because in the end, chronic long-term stress has a very similar effect on your nervous system as individual traumatic events. And when your nervous system helps you or causes you to not feel safe in your body, by default, your pelvis is going to contract as a protection mechanism in your system.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
And other things I left out there too, which I wasn't even thinking about. Then you have bladder incontinence too. You have a really
mm,
tight pelvic floor, too tight. You think you got to do Kegels and different things to strengthen it. But actually, if it's
yes,
too tight, you shouldn't be tightening it anymore. You need to learn how to relax to release the trauma. There's so much built in there that we're just not taught, which is really,
yeah,
really sad because then so many people are having really uncomfortable sex, whether it's women and it's painful sex and it's not working, or whether it's men and they're having issues with keeping an erection or pain for themselves also. What are your thoughts
yeah,
on that?
yeah, absolutely. Literally, when your pelvic floor is not able to relax, so your muscles are so tight that they can no longer relax and contract at will because they are in a permanently contracted state. What's going to happen at the physiological level is that blood flow to your pelvis is heavily constricted. And that already means that arousal, which implies a lot of blood flow to the genital area, is literally harder to reach. So, in an ideal situation, blood flow is freely happening to the genitals, and our internal structures, and with men, external structures in terms of the erectile tissue that we hold in and outside our pelvises. Um, it really loves to expand and really blow up and make sure that all these structures are enabled to then allow for lubrication and in female bodies, or women with vaginas. The erectile tissue inside our pelvis really helps as a little airbag inside our pelvis. So when this airbag system is fully inflated and when there is sufficient lubrication, then we can have a positive experience. But when our pelvis is so contracted that blood flow is impeded, naturally these next steps for arousal, the erectile tissue coming up, and lubrication are impeded by themselves as well, which causes constriction, which causes too much friction, which causes pain.
Mm,
Obviously, once you start experiencing pain during sex, there's going to be this negative cycle of your brain registering, oh no, sex is a painful experience. And every next time that you will try to have sex, the first thing that happens is, even before you get aroused, your
cry,
brain is
contracting.
exactly
Yeah, you're just like
causing
contract.
even less blood flow, etc. So it's
Yeah,
this vicious cycle of pain, that is hard to break out of.
yeah. What are the other types of pain you do see in your female clients? What do you see for vaginal pain and vulva pain and full-on pussy
Oh,
pain? Name them for
wow.
us so we can cover them again.
Yeah, it can be, it's such a broad range. It can be anything from vaginismus, vulvodynia. So vaginismus being especially at the entrance of the vagina where the muscles contract so intensely that it's not even possible for anything to penetrate the vagina. Vulvodynia means all kinds of different types of pain and experiences of pain and hypersensitivity on varying areas of the vulva. And within that, there are denominations for very specific areas where you might experience pain that have, different names in gynecological terms. We also see, generalized pain and what is often called badly understood pelvic complaints that come with sensitivities and pain. And these might be combinations of pelvic inflammation, pelvic inflammatory disease, maybe bladder cramps, even anal or rectal cramps, perineal cramps, all kinds of symptoms really that can cause a lot of pain and discomfort.
Mhm. What
And
do
this
you
is
see in
really
Go
tip
ahead.
of the iceberg. There's just so
Yeah,
much
the tip
more,
of
but
there's so much.
yeah.
What do you see in male identifying bodies?
So male identifying bodies, what I notice a lot is like tension in the pelvic floor that causes pain that radiates out in different areas of the body, especially the perineum. Obviously, the perineum in male identified bodies is a much larger area than it is in women, and there's also a lot more potential for muscles to really show up in contraction. There can be scrotum pain, there can be penis pain, so anywhere along the penis, shaft of the penis, head of the penis. If there's been circumcision, there might be scar
Numbness.
tissue that can
Mhm.
last, and numbness as well, which is very often a signal that there was pain before, but it's been there for so long that the body just sort of shut off registering it,
Mhm.
and then it turns to numbness. With men, bladder pain as such is maybe a little bit less common, but when it's in combination with prostate issues, it does become very prominent again as well. And also anal cramps are relatively common among my male clients. And when it comes to sex during pain, some men can experience sex during actual penetration, so then it's more related to the penis. But what is
So they
common
have
for
pain
male,
during penetration? Is that what you're meaning?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But what is very common is that there is pain at ejaculation.
Mhm.
Obviously, for ejaculation, the pelvic floor really needs to make some contractions to get the semen out in the right direction. And when tension is already quite high up, it might mean that it's
It
such
just
an
kind of
overload.
builds up and
Yes.
doesn't know where to go. Yeah.
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 And that
So,
that is an example that for men can cause, like a hesitation to get
yeah.
involved with sex.
Yeah, and
I
then it
mean, nobody
becomes a
wants to
mind fuck.
experience. Yes, yes, absolutely.
Because then you're
Yeah.
stuck in the, "Oh my," there's so much built up into a man having an erection and having an orgasm that it's like, okay, there's less of a man all of a sudden a lot of people go to, and that is not
Yes.
true, but it's stuck in there in our
Yes.
consciousness. So, there's a lot of reasons, but I also think there's a lot of solutions that are end up being very similar to the same. In my book, in my history of playing with pelvic floor since 2010,
Mm,
of really starting to identify it and work with a therapist and then doing my own training and so forth since,
yeah.
um, some big things I see is we need to learn how to relax the pelvic floor. Right?
Yes.
We need to learn how to have our diaphragms above our pelvis. One very, very key thing that I think every woman needs to hear, and how many of us did this for years, is sucking in our bellies,
Mhm.
which I remember I did it,
Mhm.
right? We control top pantyhose, and sucking in our bellies is one of the worst things because it impacts the diaphragm, it impacts the pelvic floor, the ribs aren't over top of the pelvic bowl. It's we have this flat belly as the best thing conditioning in our society, and it's actually causing pelvic dysfunction, pain, problems with
Yeah.
incontinence, and so many other problems. What else do you see?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that these are some really spot on examples that people don't often realize. So I think that a lot of care, institutionalized care around the pelvis is quite localized. So it's like, oh, that is the muscle that is hurting. Let's do something about that muscle. But as you're rightfully pointing out, there are so many more areas in the body that are affected by or affecting the pelvic floor, like our bellies, like the way that we breathe. Are we able to have a full body breath where really our belly can expand and our ribs can expand, so that actually through our breathing we can organize a micro massage for our pelvic floor thousands of times during the day? Hardly any one of us nowadays in Western societies, we breathe correctly because we don't.
Yeah,
We're just too stressed. There is so much constriction and tension in our bodies just from being seated all the time, which is, by the way, another thing that you really shouldn't be doing when you have pelvic complaints. But how do we avoid it
yeah.
in our society, right?
It's tricky. It
So
takes a little bit of work, right? Like, I have a daily routine where I work on the the small little, yoga tune-up balls and
Yeah.
stretch my pelvic floor, roll out my tight muscles. Even for men, you can
Yes.
sit on the ball right on their perineum and just kind of, work that out because we hold so much tension there.
Yes,
It's really
absolutely.
what other things
Yeah.
do you do with your clients to help them?
So, other than those, I mean, stretches are absolutely so helpful. If any listeners are suffering from tight pelvic floors, just
Mhm.
Google pelvic floor yoga on YouTube, and you'll have many options of really good videos for stretches that are just going to bring release almost, within a few days, probably. I love the yoga tune-up balls. I love
Mhm.
working with adjusting the breath. And one thing that I do a lot with my clients is teaching them self body work. So really
Mhm.
learning how to be with the body and how to touch the body, how to even massage certain parts of your body, not only at the level of the muscles, but really at the level of the connective tissues that grow really tight as well in response to long-term chronic stress in the body. And to be with your body with an agenda of neutrality and acceptance, and maybe, if it is available, even a little bit of love and self compassion. So,
Mm.
experiencing touch in your pelvic area without an agenda that is medical or sexual is a real game changer. And it really connects also to a lot of the trauma histories that my clients have. Learning how to be with your body in this more neutral way
Yeah.
can really, really shift the entire situation. And as one of my clients mentioned it today, this is like such a domino effect. And it really is like
Yeah.
that.
It totally is.
Yeah.
From my experience integrating and healing my pelvic floor, which also included sexuality, right? Also included whole body. There was a few pieces, and this is why I think some pelvic therapy misses the mark a little bit because I did pelvic therapy for years. Sure, we're
Mm,
going in, we're working with tight muscles, we're learning how to release them, we're doing some breathing work with it. But what it missed out in what I work with my clients, in myself as well now, and I know you, I'm just assuming you do because I know you do, is definitely doing the releasing of tension and stress, but then
mm,
also doing the trauma release emotionally so that we can heal
yes.
the tight pieces, learn how to ground and hold our nervous systems through that so that we're not in a stress response of fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze, and fawn. And then the other third piece has been adding in de-armoring, not just
Mm,
it has been, yeah, really powerful in adding in de-armoring where we're actually working with the body and then also releasing whatever the body's holding in tensions. And I
yeah.
like to explain it very
Yeah.
similar to a massage where you're finding a knot, but we're finding it in more of our genital areas, could be internal, could be external, but we're breathing and holding and listening to the wisdom of our body while we do this,
Mm,
but we're also bringing in breath and we're also bringing in sound and we're also,
yes.
bringing in approval and acceptance for whatever shows up and just allowing and
Yeah.
trusting our body to process and heal it. Those kind of 3 key pieces, I'm wondering if
Mm,
I'm missing anything, are kind of the 3 key, of course, there's sexual conditioning, like you said, coming into neutrality with your body
yeah.
and your sexual organs, but what else have you noticed that are the healing modalities that you wanna include into your work to help ease painful sex? And
Yeah. So interestingly, for me, it's become really clear that also psychosexual education is absolutely crucial for so many reasons. And I'm sure throughout this podcast series, so many examples of that arise. We know so little about how to have sex in a healthy way. We
yes.
have the worst examples on the planet in porn, in movies, in series that just show us images and suggestions around sex that are so unhealthy, not just in terms of the pressure they put on us, but literally because they do not comply with how it works physiologically in our bodies.
Yes.
And when I share about, so like I was sharing before, a little bit about how erectile tissue inside our pelvises really needs to get all the time it needs to really pump up so that it can function as an airbag against, the strong friction of penetration. The single most heard answer that I get from my clients is like, why didn't anyone ever tell us this before? And it's,
Exactly.
it's, Yeah, so it's really another piece on top of all the
Yeah.
beautiful body work that needs to be done, changing mentalities through education around how to have sex that is actually healthy for your body, let
And
alone
feels good.
pleasurable. Yes,
Yes,
please.
yes. And
Yeah, it's
just for if you're
absolutely
listening,
instrumental.
I totally agree, and if you're listening, you're like, what are you guys talking about?" Like, it takes 20 to 40 minutes for women's erectile tissue, which we have just as much, if not a little bit more, than men, where we have an entire you sure you have your clitoris and it's on the outside and you know, it's this little wee nib if you found it, maybe you haven't even found that, and that is okay if you haven't, because we haven't been taught on this. And then we have these inner bulbs and inner legs that go all the way in through our lips and all the way down or in, up, if we're sitting upwards, up to like
Mm.
cervix. There's all of this erectile tissue that fills up. And technically, a woman should never be penetrated until she's literally begging for it. Then she is ready.
Yes. Amen.
Right? Like, and we're not
Yeah.
taught this. We're not
No.
taught this. And
No.
actually vulva will start to pull in. It's like a suction where she starts to pull in and she's like, okay, now please. And literally that is when she is ready. And before that, we're actually doing a disservice to ourselves. We're actually creating
Yeah.
distrust, numbness, lack of pleasure, could be pain. There's so many things that we're actually creating by kind of like abandoning ourselves by not listening. And we don't know
Mm.
any better. And that's the problem. Like we haven't been taught this. So it's not your fault. If you're listening, you're like, what? But education, yes, education definitely
Yeah.
has to be in there so that we actually understand how our bodies work, get turned on, that trauma release, learning how to hold your trauma in an embodied, somatic way and process through it and feel it. Because I think as a society, we are so numb to everything. We're numb
Yeah.
to the news, we're numb to the war of video games, we're numb to everything going on around us. And, that's the emotional numbness. And then there's the physical
Mm.
numbness.
Yeah.
And I loved how you explained earlier of, um, circumcision. I going forward, should I have, well, I won't be having any more babies, mine are older. But if I were having, I would never circumcise them going forward because now I
Mm.
understand how many nerve endings are there and how much
Yeah.
it's genital mutilation. And I get it now.
It
And I know it
is.
was cultural. Hey, no shame if you circumcise your children. I did. Which I
Mm.
hate that I did now, but there is so and that was the thing, right? Like, everybody kinda does what the dad is per se, and it's so
Yes.
popular to and common to do circumcision, but you're cutting off so many nerves off the
Yeah.
penis, and it's causing I like what you said, there was pain, and the pain lasted so long that it turned to numbness.
Yeah.
And that means they're missing all of those nerve endings. And again, we don't know what we don't know. No shame if that's what you've done or had done to yourself or vice versa. And it's this information, this education definitely needs to be out so that we can all understand because it's affecting our lives, it's affecting our relationships, it's affecting how we show up in our day to day for something as little, some people might be calling it little, something as
Mm.
little as feeling pain during sex, which has actually contributed and built up trauma, built up tension, not breathing
Yeah.
right, sucking in our bellies. Maybe it's a bad pap smear where you contracted. Maybe it's I say this all the time, like giving birth and the door flies open and people
Mm.
are walking by and you contract, right? There's
Yes.
so many different ways that we cause sexual trauma to ourselves unknowingly. We don't mean to,
Yeah.
but we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
Thank you. I couldn't repeat it again. I don't know exactly what I said, but that's okay. That's how I work. It just like comes in and comes out.
Yes. Yes.
I'll have to re-listen. What
Mm.
else? How else do you help your clients really you know, move through this. There's so much
Yeah.
stigma around sex and body and sexuality. So you got to jump that hurdle first.
Yeah. So one of the key things that I recommend to my clients, obviously in conversation with their partners, is to take penetration off the table for a while so
Mm,
that you really allow your system to go through a little process of a reset, if you wish. As we were discussing, when pain during sex has become more frequent and you really get into this vicious cycle, the entire attitude and like the physical reaction of your body to even the suggestion that sex might happen, and that already starts when your partner looks at you in a certain way, or when there is a first kiss on the cheek and you're convinced, ooh, and this is going to lead to blah 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 blah, and then we're supposed to have sex, so you already shut off from your partner so early on in the process. It's just really, really helpful to take penetration off the table. This is
Mm,
another piece around psychosexual education, by the way, that is absolutely crucial, that really people need to learn, relearn, and understand that sex is so much more than just penetration. We are obsessed with penetration. It's like if there is no penetration, we haven't had sex. This is, by the way, incredibly heteronormative as well. But just this whole attitude that you can only have a successful sexual encounter if there has been penetration and preferably ejaculation. It's the literal example we're getting in the media, obviously, but really taking that off the table for a while. And that might mean, depending on where you are in your journey, it might mean at least a month. It might mean 3 months. It might mean, negotiating with your partner what is feasible for both parties. But what I'm noticing over and over with my clients is when they actually take this off the table and an alternative is offered in terms of broadening your scope to other
mhm.
options. We have so many options to have fabulous sex
Oh,
that don't involve penetration, but it's really the first time, very often in years, that the body is able to relax because
yeah,
that gigantic threat of pain in your most intimate zone, because that is not going to happen. It finally can open doors to desire reconnection with your partner in intimate
love that.
ways that are other than penetration. It's really
Yeah, and you
beautiful.
open the doors to feeling pleasure again. Right, and I love
Absolutely.
you can start to feel pleasure through body, through breasts, through back, through
Yeah.
feet. I love neck, right? Like there's certain times where my partner and I will play and yeah, there's no penetration. It's just let's just feel. Can we just be with
Yeah.
each other? Bring in some delicious body butter and just feel. And it's beautiful.
Yes.
It's very nervous system holding and nourishing. It feels delicious.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
absolutely love that he sees the importance of that now, and it's one of his preferred ways to connect, which is just it's really, really nourishing.
Yeah. And that's a little full circle from where we started this conversation, to really be able to appreciate these sensual versions of pleasure throughout your body, throughout your entire skin, from head to toe. It requires from you that become more embodied, that you become more attuned to your body and really open yourself up to experiencing what your senses have to offer for you. And that alone is such a joyful journey. And
Mhm.
yeah, bringing that on the table as you take penetration off for a little while. Wow. Even when penetration comes back into the mix again, these people are transformed and their sex lives are forever.
Yeah, I don't think anybody should be suffering alone and in silence. This is information that everybody needs to hear. I know when someone is suffering that they're also feeling like deep shame and something's wrong with
Mm,
me. And, that spiral can go really, really deep of how far you can go
yeah.
with the inner critic. And if anybody's, listening, and I want you to take away that it doesn't, there's nothing wrong with you, for one. There's so many different ways to work with it, but it's just we don't have the education and we're not taught how to navigate these things. We're not taught how to take care of our pelvic floor, how to take
Mm,
care of our body in that way because we're not even talking about it. So it's important to gain the education, start to do the work and see somatically where your trauma lies in your body, what you're holding on to, what you need to release. Look at doing some de-armoring, look at doing, playing with the intersection, as you said, where sexuality and pelvic floor and trauma and all of this connect because it is all connected. And
mm,
start to, I like to see it like an onion or a spiral. We're slowly unwrapping I like the spiral the best. We're slowly spiraling right down, down,
Mm,
down, getting into the more core truth of who we are, who we were when we came into this world, but yet in an adult body now that is still integrated and whole. And we trust ourselves where there's deep safety and trust. And then we can navigate life, the most juicy, empowered life from the place of full empowerment over our whole body.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
I can only say yes to that.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's
Mm.
so good. So share a little bit more, Elizabeth, where can people find you right now? How are you working with people? We're going to drop the links, of course, in the show notes, but what do you have going on right now?
So my website is my main point of encounter for the majority of people, and that would be elisabethdana.com. My socials are a little bit tired at the moment, so I am actually relaunching my Instagram after having had to cancel that for a little while. My website is the best way to go, and from there I will be linking soon to my other channels.
Love it. Having a little choking fit here. So we were going to sign off anyway. So I will
Mm,
sign off in my choking fit. I don't know. One of those tickles has got me again. But
yeah.
thank you so, so much for recording with me and sharing. We're going to drop all the links in the show notes. And oh my gosh,
Thank
I'm
you
going to
so much for having me today. It was
thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you. Till next time, everyone. I will come back not choking next time. Bye.
Bye.